Good morning and welcome to our news bulletin, coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Salia Strzemska. Since his 2-hour phone call with Vladimir Putin on Monday, President Donald Trump has appeared to back away from efforts to end the war in Ukraine. The New York Times reports that Trump is unwilling to impose sanctions on Russia. According to an unnamed White House official, Trump fears new restrictions could hurt future business opportunities with Moscow. Despite Vladimir Putin rejecting a 30-day ceasefire, Donald Trump refused to adopt additional sanctions. Speaking to the New York Times, the unnamed official said that imposing sanctions could impede Trump's goal of maximizing economic opportunities for Americans. In addition, a senior EU official told the newspaper that European authorities are frustrated with the lack of US sanctions. According to the source, Trump never seemed invested in joining sanctions on Russia.
It's got to be, right? But they want it, and they wanted it badly once it was...
And we continue with US President Donald Trump, who recently commented on recent reports of a Russian military buildup along the border with Finland. Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump said that he is not worried about it and added that Finland is, quote, very safe.
Mr. President, on Russia, are you worried about the reports on a military buildup along the borders towards Finland and Norway?
No, I don't worry about that at all. They're going to be very safe. Those are two countries that are going to be very safe.
And the secondly, sir, if I may, Volodymyr Zelenskyy is saying today that he's hoping for you to impose new sanctions on Russia. Are you considering that?
Well, that's going to be my determination. That's going to be nobody else's determination. We'll see how Russia behaves. We see what's going to happen. You know, we have a pretty critical time right now. I had a talk yesterday for 2.5 hours with President Putin, as you know. I also spoke to all of the European, or to many of them, leaders, but they were representing the whole. And I think we had very good conversations yesterday. Please.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that he anticipates Russia will offer proposals for a ceasefire in Ukraine in the coming days. He noted that these proposals presented by Moscow will enable the United States to evaluate if the Russians' intentions are genuine.
So what we're expecting now, based on the president's phone conversation yesterday and my conversations over the weekend with Mr. Lavrov, is that at some point here fairly soon, maybe in a number of days, maybe this week, hopefully, the Russian side is going to present terms that they would want to see, just broad terms that would allow us to move towards a ceasefire. And that ceasefire would then allow us to enter into detailed negotiations to bring about an end to the conflict. We are hoping that will happen. We believe that the term sheet that the Russians produce will tell us a lot about their true intentions. If it's a term sheet that's realistic and you can work off of it.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says it is vital that the United States remain involved in the peace process because Russia fears America. Zelenskyy made the comments in his Tuesday night address after speaking with several European leaders.
Ми не закінчуємо, нам потрібні спільні.
We need unified positions and even greater coordination. Diplomacy is stronger when we are united. We are discussing with our partners the ideas and outcomes of yesterday's conversation with US President Trump. It is crucial that America remains involved in the peace process. It is precisely the United States that Russia fears. American influence can save many lives if it is used to pressure Putin into ending the war.
Vladimir Putin is playing a game of cat and mouse with Donald Trump, said Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski in Brussels. Sikorski expressed hope that Trump will eventually recognize that Putin is only stalling for time. This, he believes, will create an opportunity for the U.S. to implement new sanctions on Russia, what Trump's ally, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, has been advocating for.
I, for one, believe that if President Trump finally recognizes that Vladimir Putin is playing cat and mouse with him, playing for time, rather than realistically implementing a ceasefire, it is possible to launch Senator Lindsey Graham's package, a very tough one. And if that were to happen, we, as the European Union, should be no worse off. On the other hand, Ukraine is still fighting. Ukraine has European support and still has American support, and in the background there is a package of very hard sanctions signed by almost 80 senators, that is the constitutional majority and the majority of the Republican club in the Senate.
The EU and the UK have approved a new round of sanctions against Russia. The coordinated move, targeting Moscow's shadow fleet and military sectors, aims to put pressure on Vladimir Putin to agree to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire with Ukraine. Our correspondent Angela Skujins reports from Brussels.
While trumpeting the success of the 17th sanctions package spearheaded by the EU against Russia, the EU's top diplomat Kaja Kallas acknowledged that international efforts were required to put the maximum pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin to go to the negotiating table with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Now, the remarks came at the tail end of a Foreign Affairs Council meeting where those 27 defence ministers greenlit the 17th sanctions package since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Let's take a listen to what the top foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas had to say regarding the political choreography behind today's package.
We are coordinating with a lot of partners outside European Union also, because then we have a stronger pressure if everybody agrees and wants to really end this war. So we are cooperating and coordinating with a lot of partners. What comes to the proposal by Senator Graham, I think it's a very strong proposal, and it shows that also there are people thinking the similar way in United States.
Now, this EU success comes off the back of an announcement from Westminster on Tuesday that 100 new sanctions have been aimed at Russia for that country's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. The target of these sanctions are businesses responsible in the supply chain of deadly weaponry, particularly those attacks that occurred over the weekend, which resulted in 9 dead in Sumy. In a press release released by 10 Downing Street, it acknowledged the international efforts required to hit the Kremlin where it hurts. But the big elephant in the room here is where is Washington. Late Monday evening, the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump, announced that he would not impose fresh sanctions on Moscow. He claims he does not want to risk any potential ceasefire deal in the works. But we have heard from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy that he believes Putin is simply buying time to continue the invasion. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
And we continue on the topic of sanctions. Multiple countries, including Lithuania, have called on the EU to implement tougher sanctions against Russia in the upcoming 18th sanction package. According to the Lithuanian Foreign Ministry, the EU must impose harsher restrictions on Russia as the Kremlin continues to reject the 30-day ceasefire proposal. In his opinion, the next sanctions package should target Russian energy, liquid natural gas, oil and nuclear fuel experts, as well as financial institutions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy made similar calls, saying that the EU should apply additional sanctions on, quote, Russian oil, the tanker fleet, all their energy infrastructure that finances the war, all their banks, all financial schemes, and Russia's military industry. He also announced that the 18th sanction package is already being prepared. And now on a domestic note, Poland is seeking to extend its suspension of the right to asylum. On Tuesday, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk submitted a motion to the Polish Parliament. The motion aims to prolong the restrictions in order to reduce the influx of illegal migrants crossing the border from Belarus.
Nearly 4 years into the festering migrant crisis at the Polish-Belarusian border, Poland temporarily suspended the right to apply for asylum last March. Despite objections from human rights groups, now it's on course to do so again.
The right to seek asylum is an important one, but only when it's not organized by Russia, Belarus, smugglers or gangsters. When this is not only illegal migration but also mass migration, it is, in a sense, a form of aggression against Poland.
Poland's Interior Minister Tomasz Szymoniak expressed hope for a bipartisan agreement on the extension, as, in his opinion, controlling the number of migrants through the border with Belarus is a matter of national security.
11,000 law enforcement officers and soldiers serve every day to keep the border safe. The Polish state has spent 600 million euros to build infrastructure along this border. Please be serious about these matters, as we are dealing with issues that should not be subject to political games.
So how long will you stay here?
The motion to prolong the suspension will be subject to a vote in the Polish parliament on Wednesday.
Duty-free imports of products from Ukraine will no longer be permitted as of June 5th, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has announced. Speaking to the Polish Parliament on Tuesday, Poland's head of the government said that the import regulations will revert to the situation prior to the outbreak of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Tusk noted that the autonomous trade measures, an EU mechanism geared towards aiding the Ukrainian economy, uncontrollably opened the Polish border to Ukrainian agricultural products, threatening the stability of the Polish domestic market. In recent months, cheap imports from Ukraine have led to a slew of farmers' protests across the EU bloc, including in Poland, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Slovakia and the Czech Republic. The Civic Coalition candidate for president, Rafał Trzaskowski, won the first round of the election and will do everything to win the second round and will play hard. These are the words of Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who spoke with Poland's state broadcaster TVP. The head of the government in Warsaw added that the runoff will be extremely close.
I am determined because I know what is at stake. I am not calm because I know precisely, and not because of the fact that I might be an analyst, but I knew from the very beginning, and many people did as well, know that the final will be extremely fierce, that it'll be roughly 50-50. The situation is not simple. Some want further changes. Some are dissatisfied with the government's actions. A yellow card is the fate of anyone who plays hard ball. Rafał Trzaskowski won the first round. He'll do everything to win the second round. You have to play hard. You have to fight.
The rise of the far right in Poland is a wake-up call for mainstream politicians. Zuzanna Papazowski, resident senior director for Central Europe at the National Democratic Institute, told TVP World. She added that the centrist politicians must learn to listen to what voters are saying. Far-right candidates received more than 20% support in Sunday's presidential election in Poland.
Beneath, the liberal politicians and the mainstream politicians get better at listening to what people are actually saying. I think we have many voters in Poland, but as well across the world, who were kind of left behind by different transformations, by globalization. They simply don't feel represented. And simply the far right or more populist political movements often offer very simplistic solutions to very complex problems, which are appealing to them in a way that uses on emotions. So they are actually much more effective. And I think this is kind of a wake-up call for the mainstream political parties to really get better and start listening to what their voters are saying.
Romanian hard-right leader George Simion announced Tuesday that he will contest his defeat in the last Sunday's presidential election, claiming foreign interference. Centrist Bucharest mayor Nicu Jordan won the second round. This round of voting in Romania was held after a previous election last November, won by Simion, was annulled due to concerns about Russian meddling. According to Simion, there is irrefutable evidence of meddling by foreign countries such as France and Moldova, as well as other actors. He said that 100 million euros were spent in Moldova to buy votes and claimed that dead people voted in the runoff. In a post on X, Simion emphasized that no one has the right to interfere in the elections of another state. The Eurosceptic politician also said he filed a complaint with the Romanian Constitutional Court, but is afraid that the country's top justices would not annul the elections and called on the Romanian people to follow suit and file similar complaints. EU Bucharest Mayor Nicu Jordan won the Romanian presidential vote, which was held months after a first-round election last November was annulled over concerns about Russian meddling. And with this, we conclude our news bulletin. Thank you for watching. World Talks coming up next.